Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Cardinals Nest here on HBC TV 25, the sports show about St. Mary's University and its athletic programs. I'm Dean Beckman.
St. Mary's University, red, white, purple.
I know. I wasn't thinking about it when I went into the wardrobe today, but yes, this is the sports show about St. Mary's University and our athletic programs. Dean Beckman, our sports information director and resident interrupter, Donnie Netto, and Jason Carter, our assistant women's hockey coach on the program today. So our focus will be women's hockey. A little bit later on in the program, we'll have one of our seniors on, Jesse Cwik. She's a forward on the hockey team. And Donnie, Jason, he's new to St. Mary's because Greg Moore, who was the assistant coach last year, of course, is now the head coach. So we have a new head coach, and of course that brings about a new assistant coach as well.
And you know, from what I've been able to gather, the change has been really good, and I know Greg has done a great job as the head coach, and getting to know Jason has been a lot of fun this year, and I think that he's doing some really good things as an assistant, and that obviously will be several of the questions we ask him is how he is adjusting to being the new assistant. But Jace, before we even get to that, how about giving the people a little bit of background about yourself, how you got involved in hockey, and you know, how you ended up here in the long run?
All right. Well, thank you for letting me be here. It's a pleasure to be here. So, funny story. I actually was in skating lessons as a kid, and I would cry. I just hated it. My mom has pictures of me, you know, pushing the little folding chair around, and I just hated it. And she just didn't think I was going to be a hockey player. I played basketball in like first and second grade. And then my older brother played hockey, and so I wanted to be like him, wanted to follow him, and so I decided, you know what, we're going to give this a go, and you know, 20 plus years later, here we are. So I played all the way up through high school, played at Elk River Youth Hockey, which is a big hockey city up in the cities, and I ended up going to Rogers High School. It was a brand new school when I graduated, so it was kind of a cool opportunity to play for a brand new program and get things started. And then from there, I had some juniors tryouts. It didn't kind of work out. I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do. But I knew I didn't want to be done playing hockey, so I kept at it. And I went to a free agent camp in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Me and my dad drove out there, and I ended up making a team. I signed a contract with the Evansville Icemen out of the ECHL down in Evansville, Indiana. Played with them for part of a year, had a back injury. Came home, rehabbed a little bit, tried one more time, went down to Tulsa, Oklahoma. You know, hockey hotbed of Tulsa. My dad and I, again, he loved going on road trips, so we drove the 12 hours down there. Was in preseason camp with them for a couple days, ended up not making it. And so on that long drive home, I was like, all right, playing time is done. It's time to figure out what's next. And so I was like, well, maybe I should get into coaching. And from there, I started doing some youth hockey, did some squirts, and then moved up to high school in Shakopee, coached boys for 2 years, girls for 3, and then obviously this year, first year down here at St. Mary's.
So tell us, how did you make the connection with Greg and end up at St. Mary's then?
So Greg has a friend, Phil, who works in Shakopee, and I coached with him for a couple years, and so I got to know about Greg a little bit, and I think I'd met him maybe one time before this, and you know, just kind of as I worked up through coaching, I kept thinking in the back of my mind, like, coaching college hockey is something I really, really want to do. It was a kind of a goal I set for myself, and when I saw the position open, I talked to Phil, and I was like, hey, what do you know about this? And kind of got some info, and then I applied, and you know, here we are. So,
you know, hearing your story was fascinating. It's got to be difficult to know when to make that transition from player to coach or player to career, whatever that career might be.
Yep.
Talk about that and when you sort of knew it was done and sort of the emotional adjustment you had to make.
Yeah, it's always tough. You know, every kid, I think, and at least lots of Minnesota kids grow up wanting to play pro hockey. You watch, you know, the Wild on TV or whatever, and that was a long-term goal of mine, and obviously it kind of played out in a way where I got to play a little bit of pro hockey, but I just realized, you know what, this isn't going to pay the bills, this isn't going to last forever, body's not going to hold up, so you know, I still had passion for the sport, still loved it, and wanted to be involved, and I was like, coaching would be a great way to do it, and I'd had some experience working with some youth sports camps before, and I was like, hey, I like working with kids, let's try teaching, and so the teaching and coaching really worked out, and it gave me a lot of great experiences.
What's been the biggest adjustment moving from the high school realm to the collegiate realm for you as a coach?
I think time and energy. You know, I've always had some long days of teaching all day, and then you go and spend a couple hours at hockey. But now I can take all that time and energy and focus it on hockey throughout the day. There's obviously other duties throughout the athletic department that I have, but the vast majority of my time and energy can be spent on hockey, which I really like.
As you take a look now at this year's team in particular, tell us about your thoughts on how the season has gone and some of the strengths of this particular team.
I've been pretty impressed. I think we have a good balance. We have some good senior leadership, some veterans that have been around for a while and obviously have been with Greg and know the systems. And then the freshmen, I think, have really stepped up and play. All of them have played really significant minutes and really helped out. So the team is really well balanced. Every season is going to have its ups and downs, and it's how we come back from those that really matter. And so we're in a little bit of a down spell right now, but I think we've had a good week of practice so far, and we're going to keep going, and we're in a playoff push, so we have that to motivate us as well.
Greg actually had a little bit of an advantage over you in that last year he was, or for the last 8 years, he was the assistant coach here, so he knew all of the players. How long did it take you to kind of get it so that the players understood that you were the assistant, that you got to know them a little bit? What was that like?
Kind of right off the bat, actually. So last week of August is when I came down for orientation and all that stuff. And then that first weekend of September, Greg went out to a showcase in Vermont to recruit. And he tasked me with doing a volleyball concessions for fundraising for our team. And so I spent the whole weekend just hanging out with the girls, and it was like, hey, we're going to get to know each other. We're going to spend some time next to each other. So I really want to start building those relationships and let them know that what my role is and get to know a lot about them as well.
Let's talk about that, your last comment, your role. Tell everybody kind of what Greg's expecting of you, what an assistant women's hockey coach, what are the roles of your...
So kind of different aspects. During the games, I do forwards and call it the power play units, and then Greg will do the defense and the penalty kill units. So we split that up through practice, and when we split forwards and defensemen, I'll take the forwards. We'll work on different concepts, different skills, and then he'll take the defense and goalies. During the week, he tasked me with doing the video. And so I'll break down our past games. We'll find, could be good clips, could be bad clips, depends on kind of what we want to find. And I'll cut those up, and then we'll watch those twice a week, as well as a scouting report on our future opponent. So I'll go back and watch, whoever they played the last weekend, kind of get some notes, tendencies on their forecheck, power play, penalty kill, that sort of thing. Just kind of gather some stats so we kind of know what we're getting into going ahead.
And how about recruiting? Of course, with your high school background, a little bit of an advantage there, right?
True. Yep, both of us have actually split up recruiting quite a bit. I got to go up to Toronto with Greg, and he kind of showed me the AAA scene. That's something that was definitely new to me. Just being a Minnesota kid, I was really, really familiar with high school, obviously, but didn't know that much about AAA, and now I realize how good that level of hockey really is. And so aside from that, we spent the first half of the season every Tuesday morning getting up at 4:15 a.m., practicing, getting to the rink at 5, and then on the ice at 6. And part of that reason was so that Tuesday night, Greg and I could drive up to the cities and go to games. Being 2.5 hours away, we can't just have practice in the evening and then go to a game. We have to take time out of our day to do that. So I got to watch a lot of high school games this fall and watch some really good players and establish connections with coaches and whatnot. So it's been a really good experience.
How hard has that adjustment to the recruiting aspect been? Because like you said, in high school, you get what you get. And in college, you actually have to bring in what you get. So has that been a big adjustment for you, just kind of getting into that recruiting realm?
Yeah, I'd say, kind of becoming a little bit of a salesman and trying to pick up little tricks and techniques there. And so I kind of picked Greg's brain a little bit, and we had Dan Tudor come in and do a seminar, and so I picked up a lot of tips from that. And I think it just, as I keep going, I'll get better and better at it as I gain that experience.
As you take a look at the women's hockey game here in Minnesota, especially the MIAC, how would you describe it to someone who has not seen a lot of MIAC women's hockey action?
It's really good hockey. I think it's a really high level of hockey. I think we're done with the days of just because you were a decent high school player means you can go ahead and play D3. I don't think that's the case anymore. You gotta be a pretty good player. And top to bottom, our conference is deep. We went out and played St. Kate's last weekend, and they were below us in the standings and got a couple points that we weren't expecting. And earlier we played St. Thomas, who's ranked I think 4 or 5 in the nation, and we got one from them. So you just never know. Any given night, the talent is just really deep in the conference. It's really fast-paced. It's physical hockey. It's really good overall game.
And then kind of a follow-up question to that. When you're out recruiting and talking to recruits and deciding who to bring in, are you looking at what you're losing from a senior standpoint off of this year's team going into next year, or are you just trying to find the best hockey players you can and then and then we just make it work once you have them on the roster?
I'd say a little bit of both. You obviously want to replace what we're losing and kind of project out. We even have a little depth chart now to 2 years from now, kind of looking at where we're going to be and what we want to bring in as far as forwards, defense, goalie, and everything. But at the same time, if a player is good enough, we'll make room for him. We'll find a spot for him. So there's a little bit of both of that.
HBC is going to be on hand on Friday night for your game against Gustavus. As people are watching this, can you give them a little scouting report of what they can expect from Friday night's game?
Mm-hmm. They have one really top line that's pretty good. A lot of skill. They put up a lot of their points. And after that, I'd say they have pretty good depth there, and they're just going to be relentless. They're going to keep coming at us. They're not going to back down. So it should be a good, fast-paced game.
So as we take a look now, what is the Cardinals make a playoff push here? What do you have to do the rest of the way here to try to get into either the final or one of the last playoff spots in the conference?
Yep. I'd say we got to find a way to just keep climbing and keep progressing as the season goes on. And something we talked about last weekend is we can't let one bad weekend turn into two, right? We got to forget about it. It's over, done with, and we kind of move on. We start looking ahead and thinking about ways that we can get better, and like I said, keep progressing until the end of the season, all the way through the playoffs.
I can't see Jesse right now, but I'm sure she's going to smile at this question. You talk about that senior leadership. Can you talk a little bit about Jesse herself and what she brings to this team?
I love the way she plays. She plays with all her heart. She plays intense. Just the other day, she was sitting in my office. We were just kind of chit-chatting, and she had shorts and a T-shirt on because she was going to go work out. And she probably had 10 bruises that were visible on her body because she's blocking shots. She's going out on the corners, doing those little things. And I wish we had more Jesse Cwik, to be honest. I wish we had more than one season with her.
It really sets the tone, doesn't it? And it sets a good example for the freshmen and sophomores on the team, right? So, all right, Jason Carter, assistant coach for the women's hockey team. Thanks for being on the show. Good luck Friday against Gustavus and the rest of the season here.
Thank you very much.
All right, stay tuned here to HBC. We'll talk to Jesse Cwik coming up next on the Cardinals Nest.
Don't miss out on highlights and score updates from your favorite local college and high school athletics by following HBC TV 25 Sports. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get up-to-date information on all the games covered by the HBC sports team. Grab your smartphone and add us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at HBC TV 25 Sports.
And we're back here on the Cardinals Nest as we are focusing on women's hockey on this episode here on HBC TV 25. And now we bring in Jesse Cwik. Jesse is a fifth-year senior, double major in biology and psychology, right? Good. So Jesse, of course, you heard Coach Carter right on before you. And he said he wishes there was more than one of you. Have you ever heard that from anyone before?
I have. It shocked me when it came out of his mouth. I have never heard that before.
Maybe it was because you were sitting here that he was so nice to you.
But I do want to say too, Jesse, that I have heard that you sort of at one time, maybe not anymore, have had your own little Cardinals Nest where you like to do a little studio interview type thing, right? And you were like the host. You were me.
Yep.
And only probably a much better version of it. But so tell us about that a little bit, right? You have sort of some video skills of your own, right?
Yep. So must have been 2-3 years ago. Taylor Pogreba and I, we started at the beginning of the year. We started this thing called the Cardinals Nest, and it was mainly just with our team. I think we made it like 5 months. We didn't make it very long, but every Friday we would interview someone on our team. I think we started with seniors on down, and then we got to Terry and Greg, and I think once we ran out of people, we kind of stopped. But we kind of went through, like, how did last weekend go? How do you think this weekend's going to go? How do you think the week of practice went? And then we'd ask them just some funny questions, like, what's your favorite Britney Spears song? If you were going to ice dance, what would be your ice dance song?
Right,
just
right. I think it was
like
Taylor who told me about that, so I'm like, okay, we've got to get Jesse on the show at some point, right?
Yep, absolutely. Jesse, before we talk hockey, Dean had mentioned that you're a senior, and what's next? What are you going to take with your St. Mary's degree? What's next on the horizon for you?
You know, that question stresses me out every time someone asks it. But as of right now, I have a lot of little plans. I'm not 100% sure. I want to go to med school at some point, but I'm kind of schooled out. I'm a fifth-year senior. I'm going to take some time off. I was given the opportunity to go back to Chicago next year, and where I'm from, and coach my alma mater, Chicago Young Americans. I'd coach the 16s and the 19s with Coach John Simba, so that's something I'm really considering, getting a job back in Chicago, living, taking care of family.
Which brings us to the question we usually ask to begin a show. Talk a little bit about your playing career, how you started in hockey. I know you mentioned that you played for the Chicago AAA team, and then how you ended up coming to St. Mary's.
So I'm from Chicago, and I'm not from like a big hockey family, but I'm the youngest of 6. My oldest brother played hockey, and then my sister played hockey, and I always wanted to be like my sister. So she taught me how to skate. Growing up in Chicago, girls hockey wasn't, at least when I was growing up, it wasn't actually that big. I played boys up until high school. And then high school hockey in Minnesota is this big thing. You have JV and varsity. We don't have that. I played high school hockey and AAA. And in my high school, we had like 7 different high schools come together. And that funded our high school hockey, basically. And then AAA, I played for 4 years under John Simba for most of those years. And it was great. He gave me a wide variety of opportunities. I got to go to nationals 1 year in Marlborough, Massachusetts, which I had never heard of. It was great. But for AAA, we got to travel a lot. I went to Canada a few times, Michigan, Boston, New York. And when I was like 15, I think I met Greg. And he was just talking to my mom, and I walked up, and I was like, hi, nice to meet you. And he was like, my name's Greg. I coach for this small school in Minnesota called St. Mary's. And I was like, great, I don't like small. And he was like, okay, we'll keep in touch. And so I'd see him at maybe 2 tournaments a year until I was like 17. And he just never gave up. He always came up to me at a tournament and was like, how you doing? You still considering St. Mary's? And I didn't know how to break it to him that I was never considering St. Mary's, but he was so sweet and so persistent. And then finally he was like, are you sure? And I was like, okay, well, at this point it was like March or April. And I was like, okay, of my senior year. And I was like, yeah, you know what, maybe I'm not committed to a school, and I don't really want to stay home for another year. I'll go visit St. Mary's. So he was actually at Nationals in San Jose, so I came up and met Terry. And funny story that I played soccer in high school, and the day before we had a soccer game, and I was a goalie, and he got kicked in the face with a soccer ball, so I had 2 black eyes. And I was talking to Terry, and he was like, what's going on? And I was like, I got kicked in the face with a soccer ball yesterday. But I came up and I visited, and I really like backpacking and nature, and the bluffs sold me. And that's when I decided that St. Mary's was the place for me.
Well, and I'm sure too, once you got into the biology and psychology programs, then you really knew you made the right decision.
Yeah.
Right? And then I've got to believe that double major, that's a really tough double major, right?
Yeah,
so
it's
tell
hard.
us about how you've been able to handle all of that, plus the hockey and the travel and everything that goes along with it. And I know you're involved in other parts of campus too, so.
So I only started as a psychology major, but then last year when I broke my ankle and I wanted to stay, I kind of figured like the deal with my parents was, well, you had to like further your education. You can't just stay and play hockey. So I turned my biology minor into a major, which was way harder than I thought it was going to be. I had to take physics and OChem and chemistry, so I actually spent the summer here, and I took a few classes at Winona State. Then I took physics, and I'm in organic chemistry too right now, trying to kind of get that going. But you know, just biology and psychology has just interested me so much. The show Criminal Minds got me to want to major in psychology. Yeah, but then, you know, I've had a few concussions. So, you know, looking back on it, it's like, well, how is, it was like, how has my brain changed, like, compared to someone who's normal? So, like, I really want to study the brain. So it kind of goes along with both.
I don't want to bring up a sore subject, but can you talk a little bit about last year? Like you said, you broke your ankle early in the year, so you weren't able to play, but yet you stayed involved with the team. From a different aspect, can you just talk a little bit about how you were able to do that, and I'm assuming how difficult that was?
Right, yep. So I broke my ankle 6 games in versus Eau Claire. I remember it exactly how it happened. Very painful. But, you know, I actually needed the team. So I broke it, and we kind of thought, oh, it'll be okay, like 5 weeks on crutches, and I'll be good to go. But we didn't realize that I had completely shattered the base of my leg. So they had to like reconstruct the bone and everything, and it was gonna take way longer than expected. So it was hard some days to go to the rink. I wasn't able to skate very much. Even after the season was over, rehabbing on the ice was very difficult. It took a very long time. Even now it's kind of hard sometimes, like turn a certain way and it pinches. But being able to go to the rink and hang out with my team and just be a locker room player and, you know, hype them up when they have practice and like I'm on the board sometimes. It was a new experience. I had never had that long term of an injury. But I think watching them on the ice last year, I mean, it was difficult. We didn't have that great of a year. A lot of my friends were seniors, and once I made the choice to come back, you know, it became hard to like, not distance, but I had to make the choice. So when they got to enjoy their spring semester, I was doing postseason with the team, running or figuring out captain's practices, like talking to Greg, talking to Terry, and then once we found out Terry was leaving, kind of making that transition with the rest of the team. And I'm the grandma on the team, and everyone, our freshmen this year call me grandma. So kind of like helping them transition and helping the younger girls transition.
Can you talk a little bit about that transition? You know, not put our coaches on the spot, but can you talk a little bit about the transition now with Greg as the head coach and Jason as the assistant? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
So once we found out that Terry was leaving, it was a really big shock for everyone. We had to go lift, and it was like, you could just tell, like, no one was really there. But Matt Sager pulled us together, and he was like, we're always going to be here. Like, the ice is always going to be here. You have to find a way to move on, which we did. So Greg was great up until school was ending. He was like, this is what's going to happen. Nikki was great. She was keeping us updated on how this process worked, how the recruiting went. So actually, before we got to leave for school, we got to meet with Greg and another coach. We got to be part of that interview process. So they came in and they kind of sat down with us for 45 minutes to an hour and told us like their plans. If they were going to come into this program, how were they going to keep it the same? How were they going to change it? And then we got to ask questions about like, okay, well, if this is going to happen, like, what do you think about this situation? Are you going to condition us, like, no matter what, if we win or we lose? We had a question for everyone about Herbie Mondays, because last year, every single Monday, we would do Herbies, which is like, you'd start at the goal line, you go blue line back, red line back, blue line back, far red line back. And it was miserable. Those are like conditioning things. But Greg was great. After that, he stayed in contact with us all throughout the summer. We'd reach out to Nikki and be like, how are things going? And then in August, we found out that Greg was our head coach. And everyone was very relieved. I think it was the possibility of someone new coming in. We kind of were like very anxious about that. But the fact that we had Greg, who knew our systems, and he basically ran our practices last year anyway. So it was just perfect. Like, it wasn't like we have to now get used to someone new who's going to like head our team. It was now like, oh great, we have to get used to someone new who's going to support Greg, which was way easier than before. So then no one knew, well, at least I didn't know that Jason was going to be our assistant coach. And he came in, I think like the first week of school, And he was, funny story, he was at the coffee line, and I didn't know that he was our assistant coach. And so he was talking to me about like, oh, what are you guys doing this weekend? And I was like, well, I play hockey, and we have to work, the volleyball game. He was like, oh yeah, so are we. And I was like, I thought he was like a men's recruit, and I was like, oh, so we must be working together. And he was like, yeah, no, I'm running it with you guys. And I was like, okay. And I was like, it's great to meet you, like see you on the weekend. And I left, or he left, and I turned to Maria Herman, who I was with, and I was like, is he a new men's recruit? And she was like, no, honey, that's our new assistant coach. And I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh, great first impression, amazing. So, but Jason's been phenomenal.
Donnie, we've got time for just one more quick question.
I got two quick questions,
okay,
but I heard a story that Greg actually put his pads on last week and played goalie against you guys. How did that go?
It was the best thing that's happened in my 5 years here. It was great. But we had a rule where if we took any headshots, we had to skate. So we were trying to go low, and for him being off the ice for like 5 years, it took our self-esteem down a little bit. He was really good. But no, it was so fun. It was great.
Okay, the only question I did have, and real quick, we had a conversation last week in my office. I love when she comes in and just chit-chats. But you had mentioned that when you were growing up, through your first 6 years, I believe you said, English wasn't your main language.
Yep.
Just real quick, talk about that.
So we had a nanny that stayed with us sometimes because my mom was working all the time. And it was just my mom and I and my next oldest brother, Stefan. So Agnes lived with us, and she spoke Polish. So my mom would teach her English, and then she would teach me Polish. So I could understand English, but I couldn't speak it. So I would speak back in Polish, and then she would talk to me. So then I got to kindergarten, and all of these little kids are just trying to talk to me, and I didn't know what was going on. So I would speak back in Polish, and I had to learn English, and it was an experience.
Yeah,
but
she
now
failed her homework too. She was supposed to know how to say "Go Cardinals" in Polish, and she can't remember.
I can't remember.
So Jesse Cwik, thanks for being on the show. I wish we had a little more time because I saw the interview you did with Emily Loof, and I'd love to learn more about the hot dog eating competition. That's sort of a goal of yours, but we'll save that for another time. So
right.
Jesse, thanks. Good luck the rest of the
Great,
season.
thanks for having me.
All right, stay tuned. Donnie and I will be back to wrap up the Cardinals Nest on HBC.
My name is Justin Barrientos, and I'm the sports director and broadcast announcer here at HBC TV 25. I've had the opportunity to broadcast our community's sporting events and parades. When people see the HBC live truck in their area covering the events they care about, it makes me feel good to know that I'm helping the community get recognized. HBC is committed to be involved in all of our communities. Not only do we work here, we live here, and helping build our community is important to us because HBC is people in your community.
And we're here to close out the Cardinals Nest on HBC. And of course, today we focused on women's hockey. Donnie, a reminder that everyone can see the women's hockey team against Gustavus this Friday night right here on TV 25. Justin Barrientos and yourself will have the call, so it should be a good game there. But there are some other activities coming up this weekend as well.
Yeah, this is a really crazy weekend. You've got men's and women's tennis open up on Friday at home against Martin Luther at the Winona Tennis Center. And then on Saturday, both basketballs, men's and women, play against Augsburg at home, 1 and 3 o'clock at the St. Mary's Gym. Men's hockey will then play Gustavus Saturday night, 7 o'clock at the St. Mary's Ice Arena. Men's tennis is also back in action against Carleton on Saturday. Men's and women's swimming and diving have Augsburg and Hamlin on Saturday at home at the Jewel Gurnis Pool. And then on Sunday, women's tennis will take on Carleton at the tennis center at 11 o'clock. So a very busy week of home events this week.
All right, thanks for watching the Cardinals Nest.